There's a trail near my house, one that only appears when it's foggy. Not misty, not a slight haze, but full on, can't see your hand in front of your face fog. I never really thought much of it. Small towns always have their urban legends, and ours was no exception. Growing up, the older kids would whisper about the fog trail, a path that led to somewhere you'd never come back from. Of course, it was just a story to keep little kids from wandering into the woods, or so I thought. Last week, we had one of the densest fogs I've ever seen. It was the kind that muffles sound, wrapping the world in an eerie silence. I was walking home from a late shift at the diner when I saw it. The trail. I'd walked this route 1,000 times before, and I'd never seen it. But there it was, cutting through the woods, lined by ancient trees whose branches bent unnaturally, almost forming an archway. Curiosity got the better of me. I told myself I'd only go a few steps in, just to prove to myself that it was nothing special. But the further I walked, the harder it became to turn back. The air felt heavy, as if the fog itself were pressing against my skin. My phone's flashlight barely cut through the thick white shroud, but the trail seemed to glow faintly, as though lit by some unseen source. About 10 minutes in, I realized I couldn't hear the sounds of the town anymore. No distant car engines, no dogs barking, nothing. Even my own footsteps seemed muffled. The oppressive silence made my heart race. I decided I'd gone far enough and turned around. Except the trail was gone. Panic surged through me. The trail I had been following so clearly was now nothing but a dense wall of fog. I spun around, trying to retrace my steps, but every direction looked the same. My phone had no signal, not even a single bar. I tried to calm myself, telling myself it was just the fog, messing with my sense of direction. I'd find my way back if I just stayed calm. I started walking in what I hoped was the right direction, but the trail didn't reappear. Instead, I stumbled into a clearing. The fog thinned slightly, and I could make out the outline of a structure. It was an old cabin, the kind you'd see in a fairy tale. The wood was weathered and warped, and the roof sagged in the middle. Despite its decrepit state, there was a faint light coming from the single window. I approached cautiously, every instinct screaming at me to turn around. But where would I go? The cabin seemed to be the only landmark in this endless void. As I got closer, I noticed strange symbols carved into the wood around the door. Runes or something like them. They pulsed faintly, as if alive. I knocked on the door, my knuckles trembling. Hello? My voice sounded foreign in the thick silence. There was no answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. Desperation overcame caution, and I pushed the door open. The interior was nothing like I expected. It was clean, pristine even. A fire crackled in the hearth, and the scent of freshly baked bread filled the air. The walls were lined with shelves holding jars of things. I couldn't identify most of them. Herbs, bones, unidentifiable liquids. A wooden table sat in the center of the room, and on it was a single handwritten note. Welcome, traveler. Eat. Rest. Leave before the fog lifts. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since lunch, and the bread looked inviting. But something about the note unsettled me. Leave before the fog lifts? Why? And how was I supposed to know when that would happen? I decided not to touch the food. Instead, I searched the cabin for anything that might help me. There was no phone, no maps, nothing remotely useful. But I did find a small mirror on one of the shelves. It was ornate, with a silver frame etched with more of those strange symbols. When I looked into it, my reflection wasn't right. It was me, but my eyes were wrong. Too dark, too empty. I put the mirror down quickly and backed away, knocking over a jar in the process. It shattered on the floor, releasing a foul-smelling smoke. The fire in the hearth flickered and then went out, plunging the cabin into darkness. My phone's flashlight barely worked, the beam flickering like a dying bulb. That's when I heard it, a soft tapping like fingernails on glass. The sound was coming from the window. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Slowly, I turned to look. A figure stood just outside the window, its form barely visible through the fog. It was tall and thin, with limbs that seemed too long for its body. its head tilted unnaturally, as if trying to see me better. Then it raised one impossibly long finger and pointed to the door. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I bolted for the door, throwing it open and running into the fog. The trail was still gone, but I didn't care. I just needed to get as far away from that thing as possible. The fog seemed to thicken around me, making it almost impossible to move. I tripped over roots and rocks, my hands and knees scraped and bleeding. The silence was now broken by the sound of footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate footsteps. They didn't speed up when I did. They didn't need to. They were always the same distance away, no matter how fast I ran. Eventually, I couldn't run anymore. My lungs burned and my legs felt like lead. I collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of my ragged breathing. Then a voice, low and distorted, like it was coming from underwater. "You shouldn't have followed the trail." I didn't dare look up. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying this was some kind of nightmare. The voice continued, closer now. "The trail is not for you. Leave before the fog lifts, or you'll never leave at all." I felt a hand on my shoulder. Cold, bony, and wrong. I screamed and scrambled away, opening my eyes to find myself back on the trail. It was there again, clear as day, glowing faintly in the fog. I didn't question it. I ran, following the path as fast as I could. The fog began to lift as I ran, and with it came the sounds of the town. Birds chirping, cars passing, life returning to normal. I burst out of the woods and onto the street, collapsing on the pavement. A jogger stopped to help me, asking if I was okay. I couldn't answer. I just stared at the woods, half expecting that figure to emerge. It didn't. The trail was gone. I haven't gone back since. I've heard the fog is supposed to roll in again next week, but I'll be staying far away from those woods. Whatever that trail is, whatever that cabin is, it's not meant for people like me. And if you ever see it, do yourself a favor. Don't follow it.